Travis, welcome to the show. I'm really interested to talk about what you're doing and your book that you've come out with, this Restoring Reason. And I love the subtitle, Using the Ancient Liberal Arts to Defend Against Modern Manipulation. So I don't know where you want to start, but you probably need to let the audience know what your background is that led you to write this at a time in our history, in the world's history, where there may never have been more manipulation.
I would be in agreement with you there, Dave. I guess it starts probably with, I've always been interested, I think like a lot of people, I feel better when I understand something. It's not just enough to know, I really want to understand. The example I often give people is like the Pythagorean theorem. I mean, you could tell it to me, Dave, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But I really feel empowered when I could derive it myself. I understand where it comes from. That to me, that's power. Like knowledge, it can be correct or incorrect. So knowledge for me was never power. And so I've always had that. And that's what led me when I went to university. After studying nuclear engineering in the Navy, I went back to university at University of Kentucky with the intention of going into dental school. And so I was taking a lot of biology courses because just the study of life was interesting. So as you know, in American colleges, liberal arts colleges, you have to take some humanities. So I was very lucky to take a intro to philosophy course. And that changed everything. So what I did, I changed my major to philosophy, but made sure I was still taking all those natural sciences to get into dental school. But I was doing so well, I ended up I'll apply to medical school. And that was a longer story about how that went. But I was so intrigued by philosophy. And even in the academic world studying philosophy, I still didn't know what it would mean to me later. And that was only later when I got out into the world working. And like you mentioned early on at the intro here, like the world, it does seem like kind of crazy right now. There's quite a bit of deception and this narrative maneuvering. And what I wanted for people was for them to have the tools themselves to be empowered and free and to disengage from debates and fighting these like conflicts and rather have a cooperation of processors, because our minds are just processors. And so that's when, then this whole lockdown came. So I had so much time on my hands, and I learned early on that trying to communicate my conclusions that I've drawn about like healthcare, diet, politics, business, like fundamental, deductively valid truths, I realized I was trying to explain these to people that were so emotionally invested and had all these conviction biases. And if they went to research it, they'd use confirmation biases. So they were never really going to get on board, no matter how good my explanation was and how much it conformed to reason. So through this experience of like struggling to like use reason to help people see clearly, but I couldn't get through their emotions, what I decided was I was having a lot more success when I started teaching them the trivium, or the first three liberal arts. When I started teaching them how to systematically use, especially logic and reason, how there's this like systematic, reproducible, stable, reliable method that you can use to determine truths from falsehoods, then it was magic. I didn't have to try and show them the conclusions I drew. I simply gave them the tools. And once they got the same knowledge, or the abundance of knowledge that I had, and that's available on our phones and Google, they would draw their own conclusions. They would begin to see the informal fallacies of rhetoric themselves. And once they studied it, I saved myself so much trouble and anxiety, and I had the results were crazy with my family, my friends, my colleagues. And then that's when the push was write a book about it, because I can't just have this same conversation over and over with everyone I meet. So that's what.
So one of the things that strikes me early on here in our conversation is that as leaders, business people, or whatever we're involved in, okay, we have employees, and we sometimes think, how could they think that? Or how could they do that? And you said early on that with you, you couldn't, I forget the terminology used, you couldn't really feel good about something, embrace something, whatever, until you really understood it.
Yeah.
Yet we have a whole, I think we now have multiple younger generations now that live on sound bites.
Yeah.
And they're really comfortable not knowing anything but the sound bite and then letting their emotions race. Have you taken your approach to somebody like that, and how have they responded to it?
It's difficult because, as you know, Dave, everyone's. I look at people as individuals. It's unfortunate that there's more and more collectivist thought, but the way I take it is this is how my team runs too. The best way to empower them is to give them the ability to understand. But in a new generation, like you're referring to, or maybe some multiple generations of groups of people who take everything on sound bites, it depends on how long they've been doing it in those formative years. Like in the first 14 years of their life, they've already passed through naturally the first two liberal arts naturally. And it's difficult, but not impossible, because all those sound bites, they do one thing. They don't appeal to reason, they appeal to emotion. And when you understand the difference between emotion and reason, then we begin to make sense of it. Like, this is why sound bites are used. This is why emotional talking points are used. It's why there's this constant appeal to emotion. And once the trigger has the effect, the strategy is to then use appeal to authority. If I use enough appeal to emotion, I make you afraid, feel disempowered, whatever it may be. Now you're reaching for something because you want to feel good. You want certainty. You want stability. And so since you haven't been empowered with how to think for yourself, you've just now, I mean, they even admit it now in America, it's social and emotional learning. It has nothing to do with rational or reasonable or logical. It is, they just come out and say it is social emotional learning. So once you've been emotionally conditioned, now you're living in fear. You'll take the first handrail that comes to you. That's when the appeal to authority comes. And it's really a great strategy if you're malevolent and nefarious, and your intent is to influence and control collectives. You first create the collective, and that's how it works. So what I like to do, and this is how it works, Dave, I'll give an example or like a story. If you were a magician and you did a simple card trick for me, and I didn't know how you manipulated the cards, like did he pull one there, hide it in his palm, whatever, and you did this trick, like I'd be amazed by the effect. In fact, I love close-up magicians. I'm always like, their skills are crazy, but it has this effect, and I'm like, wow. I don't believe in like fairy tale magical powers, but I am like, there is an effect on me. Emotionally, I'm like, wow. Now, what happens once I know how they did that and I see it again? Well, it doesn't have the same effect. I'm not as aroused. So every time I see that, it no longer has the effect. So by teaching people how these tricks of logic and rhetoric and these politicians and experts are, not all of them, I don't want to say they're all bad, but there's certainly clearly there are some that don't have our best interests, right? And once you see how the trick is played, then the magic trick, the magic has lost its appeal. It doesn't have its effect. And that's what I get a real joy from, is when I can show people this, and I don't have to appeal to or discuss any of the particular triggers or their political stances. I can totally avoid those, because the moment you bring them up, they get defensive anyway, so it's not going to be very effective. But if you can show them in instances that are removed from something that's very dear to them, and you use that example that they're removed from, then they see the principle in play. Then you can overlay, you describe it this way, then you overlay the thing that that is tricking them, and when they line up perfectly, they're like, oh man, I see the magic. The magic is gone. It doesn't work anymore. That's kind of how it works. That's the best way to get through to these people that have been so emotionally conditioned, is to give them the power and the tools to figure for themselves.
Yeah, and I should explain, I'm biased about training soft skills because we have a site called Habitly that trains soft skills. And, but I have said for years that America would be a very different place if instead of the terms you used were emotional and social learning or whatever you said, they were teaching in schools today, along with some political stuff. If instead we taught kids soft skills, and one of the key ones is how to discern truth, which is a different way, I think, to what you're saying. How to discern, not what to think,
right,
but exactly what you're saying. That's why I'm so interested in this conversation. Exactly. If we taught every kid how to realize, oh, that's a soundbite. Oh, that's a magic trick.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do I look behind the curtain, type of thing? And then we taught them soft skills. How do you work well together? How do you set and achieve goals? How do you communicate? How do you control anger? That yada, yada. The nation would be totally different in a very healthy way.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, do you have a recent example, or even farther back if you want, of one of these conversations that you may have had with someone, obviously not mentioning their name probably, but where they had a particular strong opinion and then you help them, peel the onion back and understand what was behind that type of thing. So you can kind of apply what you're teaching.
Yeah, it's hard to nail down one example because this is like my whole life is consumed with these. It's almost like it's like breathing now. That when someone has an emotional trigger, basically what I want to do, and this happens with a lot of my discussions, a lot of people, and the people that know me closely, they know by now that if they're approaching me with a discussion about a person or an event, I'll entertain it. But within 5 minutes, we've already shifted to discussing the principles behind it and the concepts and things like that. That's where the conversations is always going to go, because that's where I find the most value. Recently, like there's this one's come up a lot. And again, the key is to not take a stance. Otherwise, because the moment you voice what side you're on, and by the way, I'm willing to switch sides if I get compelling evidence that conforms to reason. I'll switch so-called sides or change my perception because that's the correct thing to do.
I totally agree.
The intellectually mature thing to do. But recently in America, there's this like the Roe versus Wade things coming up. So it makes for, and I'm not going to share, I'm not going to share my opinion, but that opens the door for a lot of great discussions. And the first thing, especially with the trivium, is we want to define our terms. Okay. Well, so I start asking questions. And without sharing the opinion, without even caring about theirs, I just honestly want to understand how they're defining their terms, how they're drawing their conclusions. So I ask sincere questions. How do you define life? What are the 5 signs of life? What makes this pen that I'm holding different than something that's alive? And let's go through that. And we start with fundamentals, like first principles. And principles are defined as a fundamental truth, useful in a system or chain of reasoning. So here we have a foundation that we're going to build from. I establish those first. Once we've established those principles, then I just ask questions. And here's the real trick, Dave. And this is why you can't really reveal your point of view, which you shouldn't anyway if you're earnestly trying to learn and understand the other person. But here's the trick. You just conduct the questioning as if you're on their side. Stand not opposite them, but next to them. And act as if though you're also involved in this investigation. Yeah, I wonder we could define life that way, but what about this? And then and just take them through all the contradictions that you already previously know. Because I rarely discuss something I haven't thought thoroughly about, right? Unless I'm someone that knows more than me, then I'm usually very quiet and listening. But like you said, today's generation, what I've noticed is that conviction bias is so powerful today. Conviction bias for your listeners means someone is so convinced of something, of such a deep emotional connection to something, that it must be true. They use this bias of strong emotional conviction. Well, I believe it so much. I have such strong emotions about it. It must be true. And that's how they evaluate knowledge. They don't use a reproducible, reliable, systematic, stable method like logic and reason.
Yeah.
Okay. And by the way, we hear all this all the time from politics. Maybe I'm going on a tangent, but we always hear about like unity and unification and stuff. We'll never be unified ever on our emotions. Like, I mean, your emotions and my emotions are shifting independently of our environment, and it happens minute to minute. How I feel right now could change in 5 minutes. The people I like, my partner or relationships, those could change. I mean, divorce happens all the time. So we'll never be unified on emotion. But around the truth, or even the method of obtaining the truth, they do not discriminate. There is no prejudice. It's like math. Arithmetic doesn't discriminate. It doesn't have a bad side, a good side. It just is. And if there is a place that humanity could rally around and be unified, it would be that. And as you know, politicians and our schooling system, they've eliminated those tools of reason and logic, and they keep us emotionally triggered. And this is why we are not unified. It is by design, not by coincidence.
Well, yeah, and that would go down another rabbit trail for us where we'd have a lot of fun, which we won't do, but any group is easier to control if they're divided. So,
yeah.
But
it's just important to bring this up so that people, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole either, but we need to bring awareness to this. There was something like you were saying earlier that I really liked about these generations the soft skills in school and like how to deal with anger and stuff. And I also think it's important that people understand why, like what's the value of like understanding your emotions, how to respond to them, how to mitigate and put the voice of reason. Those soft skills are incredible, like what you were saying.
Yeah. And as an underpinning to that is to understand how we are all habitual creatures and what are our habits, both conscious and unconscious or subconscious, whatever. So I just had another guest on the show who wrote a book, The Habit Mechanic, 500 pages. And cool. He's a Brit who's been involved with it for 20 years. And he estimates he spent 25,000 hours testing all the material. And, but, I never thought of it before because, but the power of teaching kids, understand how habits work, because we all operate under habits constantly. So talk to me about these first three items of what is the trivium and the liberal arts type of thing. People like me don't know a lot about that. So but help us understand in this whole concept that I like what you have is that we can never come together on emotions because we're individually running at different speeds and stuff. Yeah. However, we can come together on agreeing that there are certain truths and how do we discern those truths? And it's okay to disagree. But as you said, and it sounds like you're like me, I have one major bias in life. I just want to find the best way. Yeah. So if I think I've got the best way and you give me new information that says that my best way could be tweaked a little bit or it's not the best way at all, I'm like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
No problem. I'm not offended.
Yeah. It's so funny. Dave, so funny. I give this example all the time. Like I'm talking to you on my computer. And if there was a virus interfering with the way my computer was processing, doing against information, and someone pointed that out to me and gave me the tools to fix it, I'd say, thank you. But there's this phrase, but humans, for some reason, we don't like to be told that we're wrong. That confuses me because if I'm thankful that you've helped correct my computer and how it functions, why wouldn't I be thankful that you helped correct any errors in my reasoning? That's even more valuable, right? But for somehow humanity, it's really lost its way. We like really want to be right. We really want trophies. We really want that pat on the back and like win a victory. But the real win is when you've eliminated some virus that's interfering with the best processing possible. And that's what I want, like you. My only bias is I want the truth. That's what, to me, it's become so commercialized now, but enlightenment really is when your perception, which is subjective, is in complete alignment with reality, which is objective. When those two are in complete alignment, that is like, imagine that you perceive reality as it is, not as some illusion that has been created by maybe the politicians, news media, academia in some cases, or big tech. I don't know. But that's what I want to see. And if I'm in investments or in business, I want to, when I'm making investment, I want to, what I'm perceiving of what I'm going to invest in, I want it to be so aligned with reality, right? So I'm making the best choice. Same in a relationship. I want to, am I perceiving this person for who they really are before I get involved? That to me is the great work, lining your perception up with reality. And that's what, to answer your question, what the trivium is supposed to serve.
So can I ask a question before you dive in? Because I'm intrigued by what you said about how people really, many people, most people, I don't know, have difficulty being corrected.
Yeah.
Now, part of that is in the way that they're corrected. But let's assume for a moment that the correction is done in a loving, empathetic, respectful way. Is part of the problem go back to the root of I'm not good enough? That there's a root inside there, I'm not good enough, or there's a root of like a spirit of comparison that's always there because, that these kind of relate to each other based on media, politicians, how we were raised, whatever it might be.
Matt, I think you're 100%. I think I agree 99%. Because like I said, I don't want to, with a broad sweeping brush, but through my experience, I think it matches yours. That's why I'm in agreement, because that's what I see. Now, certainly there could be a competitive thing, but that's what it is. We all want to see ourselves in the best light, especially in a world where you brought this up earlier before we were on the call. Like social media occupies so much real estate in our minds. So we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, thinking, am I good enough? So the moment you're challenged, like, hey, you may be wrong, it hits you in a hard place. You're like, yeah, no, but I'm good enough. I don't want to hear that I'm not good enough. You're trying to be as good as everyone you see on social media. Yeah. So we have this, like, I don't know, it's like our culture, so long as we're immersed in this social media world, it's like our self-esteem and insecurity is like on full blast right now. So we're more reactive to even when someone presents to me with roses and my favorite drinks, Travis, you're mistaken. And like, no, I'm good. Like, it seems almost like that's where it's good. So I agree with you, Mike, because based on my experience, because it just matches your experience, I would say.
Well, it's interesting because there's a guy, Greg Kokel, and he uses two questions he calls Columbo questions. And so, which I want to learn more of your approach because you go much deeper. But what he does is when somebody makes a statement that he feels may not be accurate, or he just sincerely wants to learn more, he says, what do you mean by that? And then after that, the next question he says, well, why do you believe that's true? And he just gets them talking, and then he will usually either by them just explaining, why they think it's true, they'll say something that's just totally illogical. And he just leaves them with that. Or he'll ask one question at the end, and his objective is only to put a pebble in their shoe that makes them think.
That's key. That is so key. And you know what that takes is, it's like the flip side. Like when you know you're right, to me, that's real strength. When you know you're right, but you don't show anyone. When you just, like the way you describe, he's like, you just ask them, and when they say out loud the contradiction, just a simple, interesting, and leave them, like what you said, leave them with that pebble in the shoe. That's incredible confidence and strength, and incredible intellectual security that you can do that. That's hats off, because I know when I was much younger, and that wasn't the case with me. Like, if I was right on something, I push.
But I love your approach, because you're basically, if I'm understanding you correctly, Travis, you're doing the same thing, but just in more of a dialogue.
Yeah.
Where you don't have that youthful exuberance of I'm going to prove myself right because it's important to be right, which may be sincere. It may not have been, but
admittedly,
you're kind of just helping them peel back the onion.
Yeah. Well, people are looking, if they're in it can be frightening to, once you come to grips with that, some of your previously held beliefs may not be true. So what that person needs right then and there is an ally. So that's why I try to put myself on their side. Like we're in this investigation together, like we're Watson and Holmes, and oh, I don't know. What do you think? That makes sense. But what about, have we considered this? And what do you think? Not giving my side, just want to go through the investigation. And at the very least, I get a better understanding where they're coming from. I also get a better understanding how more practice at how I can communicate and improve my rhetoric. I get more experience with other points of view, maybe how to handle them better. I learn from my failures. And then it's also, if I'm really genuinely trying to understand, actually I may learn too. And that's usually the case, regardless, how I think you'll appreciate this. And this really speaks to our culture as well, Dave. A friend of mine, I've talked about this on a couple podcasts now, just because it was like a revelation for me. A friend of mine, he's like, "Hey man, you got to check out this show. It's really crazy. It's really fun." And what it was is these teams of engineers put robots in like a boxing ring or something, I don't know. And these robots would fight each other. And they designed one with a hammer and one with a saw or a drill and electrocute or a net, all like diverse robots. And it was really interesting that the two teams of engineers were wearing like blue shirts and red shirts. I'm like, man, this is just the analogies are so blatant. Like two political parties. And what I saw fascinating, because I look at these things in general principle, not what's actually happening. Here's what's actually happening. Two teams, they both design a robot, put it in, one wins and one loses. And then what happens, the team that wins gets a trophy and they celebrate, champagne, spraying it everywhere, woohoo, cheers, confetti. The other team is moping and losing, back to the drawing board. Oh, this, sad. The guy that was controlling it may be crying. I thought that is really strange. This is an exact replica of how society works. And that's why it's so messed up. It's so confused that we celebrate this trophy or medal or a ribbon. We're losing sight of the bigger picture. What really happened, this is what's on the surface, but what really happens, Dave, think about this. Two teams put together a concept each. They put those concepts in the ring. Not themselves. They're not in there. The concepts are. The concepts there are the designs. And at the end of this battle, we have clear proof of which concept or design was superior to the other. So really, both teams of engineers interested in the best optimal concepts in that situation, both teams are now wiser. The whole group is now wiser. We don't put the superior concept or what we've learned in the lesson, we don't put that on the pedestal. We put the trophy. Humanity worships and celebrates the trophy, the victory. But the true victory was, imagine this, it was two political ideologies. We put them both in not the people. We separate the people from the idea, the message from the messenger. You put in two political ideologies or two philosophies. Which one conforms to reason? Which one's superior to the other? The ideologies battle it out, not people. And then the superior ideology wins. And we all win because we're all wiser. But as long as we continue to celebrate and focus on the trophy, then we're all losers. Even the guys spraying the champagne, we've all lost because we've all lost sight of the true goal. When I saw that, I go, that's what humanity's doing right now. They've lost.
I think one piece of that is in the business environment where a leader is more interested in winning or being right than the relationships that they have with their people and really finding the truth.
Yeah.
And going back to, I like your example there, but what strikes me in your approach in these conversations is you didn't mention it, but you seem to go into the conversation, and at this stage in your life, this season, you've learned, both of us have a few years and probably a few mistakes. I know I have tons. I like to say I'm going for my PhD from the School of Hard Knocks, but they keep sending back my thesis. That's not good enough, so I have to keep going at it. But you go into the conversation, first of all, you're committed from the outset to the relationship. Mm-hmm. You have an expectation, which is very wise and less common. I hesitate to say rare, although rare might be more appropriate, where going into the conversation that you're probably not going to change their mind. Mm-hmm. But you want to plant some seeds that help them learn how to think. And then you have this sincere piece of you that's just like, hey, if you have new information and it's truth, it's factual, the three things in this trivium that you focus on that you should talk more about, by the way, that you're open to it.
Yeah.
Because that's your deal.
Yeah. And the people will align with that. I think, like, talking with you now, I think you're probably pretty good at this if you're not already doing it. But when you're in a discussion with someone, if the tone is good, it's like tuning an instrument. They're going to tune to you. It's the more pleasant, I hate to use the word vibration because it's been co-opted by spiritual gurus and everything. But really, it's like tuning an instrument. So people really want an ally, especially if there's any hope of them giving up a previously held belief, especially if it has to deal with their ideology of the world, And so if you can just be like an ally, whether they're right or wrong, another tactic I hate to call it a tactic, but is to try and strengthen their argument, like help them strengthen their argument, even if it's wrong or doesn't. But as long as I stay, like, I'm an ally, I'm on your side, let's try and work this out. And then when we find its failure together and they see me pivot and shift, well, then maybe what they're going to do? They're going to go right along with you. And the best thing is they know they're not alone. Like, they feel like they're part of the process. Like, and they should be, if you're doing it correctly, they come to these conclusions themselves. And this is just normal conversation. The people that are closest to me and the ones that I mentor, though, we get really into not just this kind of topic, but I'm actually trying to teach them like the hard skills, not the soft skills, but the hard skills of logic, like going through conjugating the operators and doing truth tables, like conjunction, disjunction, negation, conditional, biconditional. But that's a bit deeper. We don't all have to be like logic lunatics like myself.
Well, I really like what you're teaching. Travis, I feel like I'm just starting. I don't smoke cigars and I don't drink, but you're a type of guy. I feel like I could kick back with a cigar and a good whiskey. At least I'm told there's a good whiskey, and just, talk for 4 hours, outside on a patio. And I've never said that before, by the way. So, but anyway, how can people learn so they can buy your book, Restoring Reason? How else can they learn more about what you're doing or get in contact with you?
Well, all of that they can find in one easy place if they just go to restoringreason.com. Restoringreason.com, there you can download the first chapter for free. That's what I tell people to do first. It's free. And then I'll have your email address as well. I still haven't, the book released February 22nd. I don't think I've sent out a single email to anyone yet. But as discussions grow, we're putting together a group. I'll keep you up to date if anything changes. But I'm running 9 healthcare offices here. I'm on the board of directors for these things. If there's enough demand, then I'll put something together and then I'll let people know. But I'm not the kind of guy to market you all the time. But if you do have questions, you can send an email. I'm pretty good at responding because I love these kind of discussions. And I hope I'm not a bad influence on you that you said you'd enjoy a cigar with. But I can definitely chat with you too. So if they go to restoringreason.com, leave an email, you can download the first chapter for free. If you like the tone of the book and you find it easy to read, that's how it's designed. Because really, this is a start. I wrote this book as a starting point. I showed you this book before we began, and I used to recommend this to everyone. and the Trivium by Sister Miriam Joseph. But I guess like this new culture, this book reads honestly like a college, like boring text. Although I love it, the information is powerful. But because it's not sexy enough and there's not really the what's in it for me in the book, it's just cold hard facts, you know? So in my book, I wanted to make it clear and inspire people. This is why it's so important. This is why these skills will impact you. Like, you really should take an interest in this. If you don't take an interest in your mind and cultivating it and nurturing it, I assure you, other people are doing it without your knowledge, right? So just go to restoringreason.com. You get the first chapter free. You like it. I think you can even order from the website. You can contact me from the website. And if Dave, you're nice enough, I'll even put this podcast on the media page and let people know who's the guy that got you smoking cigars.
Sounds great, Travis. It's been fun. I hope we can connect again.
Yeah, we could definitely chat for, plenty. I'm certain of it.